Welcome to our Veterans Day virtual celebration. For the second year in a row, this Veterans Day looks a little different than in years past. Although our get-togethers have been replaced by virtual observances, we still hold on to some semblance of what life was and what we pray it will return to. However, the memories and emotions this day brings are always the same. Whether the uniform is worn today or was worn decades ago, Veterans Day is a special holiday that honors all those who have served in the United States military, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard. But Veterans Day isn't just a day for veterans, it's a day for all Americans. Those who have served and have returned are now our community members, neighbors, and friends. This year, we felt learning about the veterans where we live and listening to their stories of service and sacrifice will benefit us all while letting them know how much we appreciate all they've given for our country. We hope you enjoy their interviews. Thank you for choosing to honor veterans today and to show your support for our heroes, past and present. To all those who serve, to you and your families, and to all of our veterans, thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fights o'er the ramparts we've watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
103 years ago today, an eerie silence fell on the battlefields of Europe as World War I came to a conclusion. At 5 a.m. on the morning of November 11th, 1918, an armistice was signed in a railroad car parked near a small French forest near the front lines of what had been almost 4 years of utter chaos and turmoil on the Western Front. Colonel Thomas Gowdenlick, an intelligence officer serving with the U.S. 1st Infantry, recounted, quote, "On the morning of November 11th, I sat in my dugout, which was our division headquarters, talking to our Chief of Staff and Lieutenant Colonel. A Signal Corps officer entered and handed us the following message. Official radio from Paris, 6:01 a.m., November 11th, 1918. Marshal Foch to the Commander-in-Chief. Number 1. Hostilities will be stopped on the entire front beginning at 11 o'clock. November 11th, as of the French hour. Number 2. The Allied troops will not go beyond the line reached at that hour on that date until further orders. Signed at 5:45 a.m. As the sun rose on that morning of November 11th, 1918, people came out of their homes and began celebrating, dancing in the streets, with the sincerest of hopes that this armistice that was signed in the early morning hours meant an end to the war to end all wars. But on the front lines, no one celebrated. Many on the front line, veterans through 1 or 2 tours, had come to believe that an armistice was simply just a temporary measure and the war was going to continue. But as the evening came on November 11th, this unearthly silence, quietness, penetrated the souls of these tired soldiers. And these soldiers began to start log fires along the front lines. Probably the first log fires that had been lit in the Western Front for years. And some of these soldiers, huddled around these fires, tried to reassure themselves that no enemy spies were lurking above the next hill, trying to find a good sniper position. Others were praying that no German bombers were going to approach just to blast them out of existence. And many were talking in low, hushed voices, concerned about those enemy spies, snipers, or those bombers. While others, sensing something might have changed, began to exhibit a sense of optimism. But regardless of how they felt in the immediate moment, all of these soldiers were inconsolably nervous about the future. Though the initial armistice signed on November 11th expired after 36 days, it was extended several times until eventually the Treaty of Versailles was signed the following year in 1919. Finally, bringing a peace to a war-torn Europe. And as a holiday, the first Armistice Day was celebrated at Buckingham Palace in England on the morning of November 11th, 1919. And those in attendance at this first Armistice Day observed a tradition that we still celebrate today all throughout the Western world. They observed 2 minutes of silence as a mark of respect for the lives that were lost or left behind in that war to end all wars. And today, we continue this tradition. We observe 2 minutes of silence each Veterans Day, November 11th, at least here in Texas, at 1:11 p.m. Central Standard Time. And on this same day, U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, knowing the gravity of what had just occurred, celebrated the first Armistice Day by expressing his thoughts on what he felt like Armistice Day was going to mean in the future for Americans. And he said, "Armistice Day will be filled with solemn pride in the heroism of those who died in the country's service and with gratitude for the victory, both because of the thing from which it had freed us, the tyranny that had freed us, and because of the opportunity it had given America to show her sympathy with peace and justice in the Council of Nations." So, in one short paragraph, the narrative of Armistice Day had been written. This was a commitment to the goal of establishing everlasting world peace. Why not a day of remembrance for veterans? Well, at this point, Memorial Day had already existed, and its sole purpose was remembrance of our deceased veterans. Some at this time thought 2 holidays for veterans, that doesn't really make sense. World peace sounds really good, so let's go with that right now. And the tone of world peace continued for 10 years. So on the 10th anniversary of Armistice Day, the U.S. Congress adopted a concurrent resolution that requested the President to call upon all the officials to display the flag of the United States on all government buildings on November 11th, and invited the people of the United States to observe the day in schools, in churches, or other places with appropriate ceremonies expressive of our gratitude for peace and our desire for the continuance of friendly relations with all people. Now, once again, 10 years later, the focus is still on this elusive goal of establishing world peace. But veterans were not lost on President Calvin Coolidge, who gave an address on Armistice Day in 1928. And he wanted to acknowledge the sacrifice of veterans, and he wanted to acknowledge how Americans felt about their veterans. And first he talked about the progress of the Veterans Bureau, which was the precursor to the Veterans Administration that we know today, or VA. And President Coolidge said about our veterans, "Our admiration is boundless. It's not mere idle form. There's no shadow without reality. But there is a solid and substantial effort rising to the dignity of a sacrifice that was made by all the people, so that in some degree they recognize and they recompense with those who had served in times of national peril." Still, the focus and the theme here is establishing world peace. But Coolidge made a nod to our veterans from World War I and said, "I haven't forgot about you. Fast forward another 10 years. Let's go to 1938, the 20th anniversary of Armistice Day, and the world has radically changed once again. Western Europe is now crumbling under military, political, and economic pressure that it has not seen since the first war to end all wars began. And this time, Germany, under the specter of the Third Reich, is threatening Western democracy and Western civilization as we know it. In May of 1938, Congress passed an act to officially declare November 11th in each year a legal holiday, citing that this day should be dedicated to the cause of world peace and thereafter and be known and celebrated as Armistice Day. Once again, with the prospect of Western civilization being torn asunder around us all, world peace was the goal. World peace was the purpose of Armistice Day, and world peace was what we were after. And without going into the history of World War II, I think we all, as Americans, collectively know the collective sacrifice that our veterans in World War II made. But the changes brought on by World War II to fight this existential threat, for the second war to end all wars, it wasn't lost on President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And President Roosevelt was the first president up to this point to really recognize and connect the gravity of the mission of World War I to this looming threat of fascism in the Second World War. In his 1942 Armistice Day address at Arlington National Cemetery, President Roosevelt was looking out at the tomb of the unknown soldier, and he said the following: "The American unknown soldier who lies here today did not give his life on the fields of France merely to defend his American home, just for the moment of his passing. He didn't do that. He gave it for his family. He gave his life for his neighbors, and he gave his life for all of his fellow Americans so they might live in peace in the days to come." But his hope wasn't fulfilled. Today, American soldiers are giving their lives on all the continents and on all the seas in the world in order to ensure that dream of that unknown soldier may come to pass and come true at last. Finally, we have a president who connects the spirit of World War I with the looming threat and the crisis of World War II. And it wasn't until the end of World War II that Armistice Day's purpose, the soul of Armistice Day, came into question. And none other than a veteran could articulate this in a way that made sense. A veteran, World War II veteran by the name of Raymond Weeks, also an Alabama native, became very active in civilian life after leaving the military in 1945. He served 3 tours, or 3 terms, however he talked about it in various newspaper accounts until his passing in the 1980s, in the Alabama House of Representatives. He served his state. He joined a lot of other organizations, but the thing he was most passionate about, the thing that he later said, later in life, in his twilight years, that was his life's goal, was establishing a National Veterans Day, specifically to honor our veterans, both living and deceased. So what did he do? Like any good soldier, he's back less than a year, and in 1946, he's petitioning General Dwight D. Eisenhower and saying, hey, we need to recognize our living veterans too. And he went a step further. He established the first National Veterans Day on November 11, 1947, in his hometown of Birmingham, Alabama. Before long, Weeks became the founder and national chair of this National Veterans Day project. And in short, he tried for 8 years to get Congress to rename Armistice Day to Veterans Day. 8 years. Finally, in 1954, a Kansas representative in the House named Edward Rees sponsored a bill to finally rename Armistice Day to Veterans Day. And it passed. And in a proclamation recognizing November 11th as Veterans Day, now President Dwight D. Eisenhower stated, "Let us solemnly remember the sacrifice of all those who fought so valiantly on the seas, in the air, and on the foreign shores to preserve our heritage of freedom and to rededicate ourselves to the task of promoting enduring peace so that their efforts shall not have been in vain. And with that, we connected the history, the heritage, and the spirit of Armistice Day with what Raymond Weeks worked 8 years for. Let's recognize our veterans alive today and those that have passed. So, throughout the Cold War all the way to the present, Veterans Day has largely remained the same, absent this quirky Uniform Monday Holiday Act in the 1970s that moved Veterans Day to the fourth Monday in October from 1971 to 1977. Just think about that a second. Veterans Day and Halloween pretty much compressed into about the same week. And this didn't go over well. American people really didn't know how to feel about it. Yeah, a lot of Americans were probably happy to have 3-day holidays, but those that remembered Armistice Day, those that remembered how hard Raymond Weeks had worked to establish this Veterans Day that we're calling it now, they refused to move the holiday due to the historical significance. You had states just outright saying, we will not follow this law because Veterans Day, November 11th, has meaning. And so, after going back and forth on this for a lot of years, Veterans Day was finally restored to November 11th of 1978. And over time, generations of Americans have come to recognize November 11th as a day of reflection. It's a day of remembrance for those gallant few of all generations that served, that believed in, fought for, and some died for. A set of ideals and a set of ideas so inextricably linked to our country, the United States of America, to preserve this country so it still may stand, and as so eloquently said by President Abraham Lincoln on a solemn November afternoon in 1863 to dedicate the battlefield of Gettysburg, that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. And as we've so often seen throughout American history, the men and women of the armed forces who willingly, from generation to generation, put on the uniform and tirelessly and selflessly put themselves in harm's way for this greater good, this nobler purpose that Lincoln talked about in 1863, to preserve a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And finally, if we wish to honor our veterans, not just twice a year, not just Memorial Day, not just Veterans Day, but every day, we must remember that their sacrifice that they made on the battlefield must be met with our solemn civic duty to ensure their sacrifices were not in vain. What can you do? Help a disabled veteran with their groceries. They're a neighbor, help them out. Sit down with a relative over the holidays. The holidays are coming up. And pull out your iPhone, your Android, and just ask them about their lives. Record it. Your family might care in the future. Future historians will care. Better yet, also call your congressman, call your congresswoman, and let them know our veterans deserve the best health care possible. Or simply just tell a veteran thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your sacrifice. And thank you for your selflessness. With this, we can all do our part to make sure that the greatest of us are not forgotten. Thank you for your time, and have a happy Veterans Day. Our first interviewee is Glenn E. Burns. He was a staff sergeant who served in the 82nd Airborne U.S. Army from 1978 to 1988. And the 82nd Airborne is a very decorated unit in the U.S. Army. It's an elite division that can rapidly deploy in under 18 hours' notice. And the 82nd Airborne has virtually been involved with almost every conflict the U.S. military has been in since World War I. With Glenn, I really enjoyed talking with him about jump school. He's got a great story about that and the interesting places that he jumped over his career and his 100-plus jumps throughout his career he talked about. And most of all, he had some very interesting thoughts and sobering thoughts about Veterans Day that I hope everybody enjoys.
Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. From there, I went to Fort Benning, Georgia for infantry school. Upon completion of infantry school, I stayed at Fort Benning and went to jump school. That was a 3-week course. An incident that happened at jump school, roughly when we started the class, we had over 500 students ready signed up to jump school. They got us that afternoon. They took us up, marched us out to the parade field, put us in the bleachers, and they said, now we're going to give you a demonstration so you guys understand a little bit about what you're going to be doing. Well, they told us to look up in the sky. We looked up in the sky and we saw 5 parachuters coming down. And they all had their chutes deployed, and the guys explaining to us what's going to happen. We're all watching, and all of a sudden, one cut away. His main canopy cut it away, and he started free falling. And we're all watching him, and the instructor's talking, and he says, he's looking, he goes, okay, he should deploy his chute. He should deploy his chute. Damn it, why ain't he deploying his chute? And the guy hit the ground no more than 50 feet from where I was sitting. They quick brought in the MPs, secured the area off, took us away. So we went that night, and everybody's sitting in the barracks, do we really want to do this? Well, the next morning they came out and they said, anybody that had seen the accident and does not want to jump anymore, line up over here. The line went for 2 blocks. After they got everybody processed, we were down to 200 jumpers that stayed in jump school. And I was one of them. I made jumps in Panama, all over the United States. One of my exciting ones was jumping into Panama.
Tell me more about
It
that.
is nothing. It is totally, it blows your mind because you're in the aircraft and you're looking and all you see is ocean. The Air Force guys are standing there, get ready. And you're looking, all you see is ocean. You don't see no land anywhere. You start going out the door, and usually on your trips to Panama, you've been in the air for about 6 hours, and nobody's in a good mood in the chalk lines. They're all getting antsy, and you just start pushing. And you're going, you get pushed out the door, and you count, open your eyes, your chute opens up, you look around, all of a sudden you're over the ocean. There's water everywhere. And you start looking and back off to your left to right, there'll be a beach. Well, as you're drifting across the open bay, there's sharks swimming in the bay below you that you can see. And that's where the Army does their warfare training, is in there. But you're looking and you're going, gosh, I don't want to hit that. Well, then you look, you got beach, and there's people waving to you out on surfing and stuff. Then you got a road, and there's a little field, cane grass that's real high, and then the mountain. So you got a short area to hit. Well, when I jumped in, we hit that area and jumped in, gathered our chute up and everything. Me and another guy were trying to find our way through the elephant grass. And his name was Kip. We were walking, and we came across what we thought was a log. And so I just kicked it, went to move. It wasn't a log. It was an anaconda. It was about that big around. And Kip said, that moved. Needless to say, you saw 2 grown men screaming, running through the elephant grass, trying to get to the deuce and a half to get loaded. And the guys are watching us up there. They said, all we're just doing is zigzags back and forth. And then they tell us, oh yeah, we forgot to tell you guys, there's anacondas out here. There's all kinds of wildlife you got to watch for. They don't tell you that before you jump on the plane.
Really good memories of there. Just any in particular you want to share about being in Grenada?
The friendships that I made with other soldiers that I knew through the years.
Do you still keep up with them today?
Some of them do. I got one friend of mine he lives up in Michigan. He saved my life. Literally, I mean, in a training exercise with the CAV, we had KZ 400s motorcycles, and our job was to go out and find DZs for our helicopters to land safely. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a training mission. Nothing's supposed to go wrong on a training mission. Well, we were on patrol, and we got hit by aggressors. We call them the enemy patrol. Well, standard procedures for on our motorcycle squad is you try to outrun them. Well, I turned around and started heading back up one hill, and David went down the other. I could see in my mirror they had him off his motorcycle and had knives to his throat and everything else. So I wanted to get back to the rest of the patrol to get them to get back. As I started up the hill, soldiers started coming out of the woodwork, throwing stuff at me. I had a guy throw a M60 tripod at the motorcycle. It hit the gas tank. Luckily, it didn't hit my knees or anything. Just as I got to the top, there was one soldier standing in the middle of the road that I needed to get around. So I just gunned it, swerved to go around him. When I did, he decided he was going to hit me with the butt of his M16 rifle on my hand. Well, what he did was, from this finger, this is the only finger I had straight. All of these were laying straight down from breaking. He broke the hand. Well, Dave was a medic, EMT back home, and he came running up there to see about me. Well, one of the guys grabbed my hand, and he started yanked the glove off. So I said, I have no feeling. Well, that's what they should have done, because when that whole section fell, I went into shock. And David was able to keep me awake and get me to the emergency field hospital.
What does Veterans Day mean to you?
Before I ever became a veteran, it was just another holiday. Once I became a veteran, and I understood the sacrifice that these men have put in, and I hate to see anybody badmouth any military. I tell my wife, if it came to it tomorrow, I'd grab a weapon and help defend this country, because that's what I believe in.
Our next interviewee is Wilbur Laverne Fry. He was an SP-5, also known as the Specialist 5, with the U.S. Army from 1955 to 1961. While the Specialist rank isn't commonly known within the modern U.S. Army structure, it was a rank that began around 1955 and was finally phased out around 1985. And this specific rank of Specialist was denoted for service members that achieved some special technical training or some specific experience that was critical to the U.S. Army's mission. And in Mr. Fry's case, he worked in various capacities on radar, but he was a specialist in electronics. He served building radar sites, repairing radar sites, all the way to working with private contract industry, trying to understand how to make repair sites or radar sites that were from two different eras all work and talk together. And as a fellow ham radio operator, I really enjoyed our discussions talking about how radio technology changed from the 1950s to 1960s. I hope you enjoy his interview.
I had a second lieutenant in charge of my radar, and knowing he was going to be in the bottom of the barrel after he opened his mouth, but he spoke up and told the bird colonel that was out there, he said, "Sir, I've got a young man here that's put in for the school twice, and he's been turned down locally here each time." Well, I had that weekend off, and I was on the way to the gate. My wife had come to pick me up, and the lieutenant stopped me, and he said, "Fry, I want to let you know, next week you might be going back to Fort Bliss for your school." And he said, "I knew you had a house trailer, and you can't just hook on and go. You got to get everything ready." And he said, "I knew you had the weekend off. He'd really check this stuff out, you know." And he said, "I wanted to let you know so you could be ready." And I thought, oh, man, because my wife had had a miscarriage on one of our travels back and forth. And there she's 6 months along, and I thought, oh, I don't know what to do. And if we stay there, I can't be with her because I'm going to be down there on that mission, you know. And so when I walked up to the car, she could tell by the expression on my face something wasn't right. And she said, "I suppose you don't get the weekend off." And I said, "No." I said, "The lieutenant just told me we might be going to Texas next week." She said, "We're going." I said, "Bonnie," but she said, "Laverne, if I have to lay in the back seat all the way down, we are going to Texas. You understand?" And I said, "Yes, dear." So I go in Monday morning. They haul me into the battalion, which is about 40 miles away. And they said, first off, you're supposed to have 9 days travel. We're down to 6 days, so you're not going to be able to drive. And I said, whoa. I said, I've been through this thing one time. My wife had to drive down. I said, she's 6 months pregnant. We have a house trailer. I'll go to the chaplain, post commander, anybody I've got to go to on this post. I'm not going and leave her here or have to try to drive or something. No, it ain't going to happen. And I said, I've driven it twice. I can do it in 3 days. Well, if you'll sign a release, I said, I'll sign whatever. Well, you could have thought they could have tried to get me out of there that day. No. is the end of the second day before they got me out. So now I'm down to 5 days
Oh, wow.
travel. But Army, they can't help you, you know. And just as I'm starting out the door, they said, and we'll see you in a year. And I still had my hand on the doorknob. And I stopped and I said, what? We'll see you in a year. And I said, how's that? We send a twitch down and you come back. There's no way out of it. And I said, we'll see about that. At Fort Bliss, I went into school, and I never was good at tests, your written tests. But you had I think it was 8 weeks. We had basic electronics. Then we went into the training of the maintaining the radar. And when we got into the radar, you had 2 troubles on the radar and then your written test. They both counted 50%. I maxed the practical one each time. So that carried me.
They carried you on the written test.
On the other one. But anyway, well, I found out they had a form that if you could find somebody within 1 grade of you, fill that out, send it out, and they could take them instead of you. Well, there was a guy there from Ohio. At that time I was a Spec 4, E4, and he was a PFC, and he didn't want to stay in Texas. So this worked out good. I was so great. So we had the battery clerk fill it out, send it off. No answer. So about halfway through, about 6 months into the class, we did it again, no answer. Well, we had bought a new trailer, a 2-bedroom with the baby. We wanted a bedroom for there. Well, I had given up. There's no way I wasn't going to have to go back out there. And so the Saturday before I was to graduate, that for the coming Friday, we sold the trailer. I went into class that Monday morning, and the assistant class leader came over and he said, Fry, did you get that transfer? And I said, no. I said, if I just give up. He said, no, go to building 2, see the major. He said, I was over there this morning. I told him I'm from, he said, and I didn't have anybody to swap with me. He said, I told him I was from New York and I did not want to stay in Texas. And he said he changed my orders. So we went over at break, walked in, and it was his secretary, then him. Well, going past the secretary, she stopped me and she says, what are you doing? I said, well, I want to see the major. Do you have an appointment? I says, no, I'm sorry. She said, you have to have an appointment. I said, okay, when can we get one? Next Tuesday. I said, ma'am, we're graduating Friday. She said, I don't care. Next Tuesday. I said, so we walked out. So I told Hathaway, I said, we're coming back at lunch break. And she had a work desk, her front desk, then the work desk. I said, they had glass in the door where you could watch. Yeah. And I said, when she turns around that work desk, we're going through. As soon as we went through the door, I had to hand it. She said, sir, permission to speak. And I got about there and she yelled, hey, where are you going? I said, and the major said, it's fine. He was a real nice guy. He said, it's fine. I'll talk to him. He said, it's okay. So she shut up. So we sat down and he said, pardon me, I've got to make some calls. He made 2 or 3 calls all over the country. And then he turned around and he said, now, what can I help you with? And I told him, I said, we'd had this form filled out twice, but they wouldn't acknowledge. He picked up the phone, he called, and he said, the 14th of July, you've scheduled for a specialist Fry to be there in his place at a PFC Hathaway. Hung up. Didn't ask, he just told him and hung up. He said, tomorrow morning, your orders will be. And then they sent some of us, what they call up range, to above Fort Bliss. It's called McGregor Range. And fortunately, I got put on what we call an experimental radar. And it was the radar that's supposed to track the airplane that normally they would transfer from the acquisition to me, and then I would hook on and go. Well, on this one, we had to track that missile from when it come out of the ground.
When it launched, yeah.
Well, on the radar, all they see is ground. And all you got all this clutter. And when that missile, you didn't see it, come up through there because this is a little in amongst all that stuff. Well, we weren't getting onto it. And we had a sergeant in charge of us, and then we had a civilian that worked for the government, that was over the whole thing. Well, I knew him from, he'd been in the same organization I had been back when I was instructing. And he had retired and become on civil service, and he had the job out there. Well, I sat there and I watched that, and we had a control unit that you plug in, and you sit there and you move this radar up, down, around, what have you. And then you had a scope on the side of it, because we had a test mass you'd line up on. So I sat up there and I watched it, and they'd give me a countdown, and they'd say launch. And so I'd watch for that missile, and when it come, I'd start saying that and run that radar up.
Yeah.
Well, I was getting it up and keeping it, watching that scope there. And when it would get above the ground level, I'd tell them inside, lock on. Well, we was catching them just like that. So John, the civilian, he had a seat kind of like a tractor seat mounted on there, and then that scope mounted there, and then this controls we had. So now a guy could just sit there and just watch through that, and boy, we was hitting them every time. And
Okay, for the final two interviews, I wasn't present conducting these interviews. My wife, Jean Fair, who's also a Texas historian and also an attorney, did these interviews, and I want her to talk briefly about these two interviewees and her impression she had on them.
As you'll see from this interview with Mr. Masters, he has one of the most humble attitudes about his service that I've seen in any veteran. Even though he didn't see armed conflict, you'll see that his role in facilitating communications is just as vital as any other role in the service. And you'll also see one of the most heartwarming stories that I think we've gotten out of these interviews so far. His family arranged for him to meet up with one of his old Army buddies just 3 or 4 years ago, after having not seen him for, I think it was around 58 years that he'd gone without ever seeing this Army buddy. So I hope you enjoy his interview.
Well, back at that time, we had the Korean thing happening, and now my mother wanted me to go to college, and so I went to Tarleton Military School there in ROTC, and I went a year there, and I run out of money. Had to go work in a chip mill to supplement and get my things, and then while I was working there, well, my time come and I got drafted, so I wasn't a volunteer, so I was drafted into the military.
Right. About how old were you at the time when that happened?
About 22.
22. And about what year was this, would you say?
It's 56, I believe, something like that.
56. Which branch were you drafted into?
In the Army, regular Army.
Regular Army?
Uh-huh.
All right. Where did they send you for basic training?
In Fort Chaffee, Arkansas.
Arkansas.
And Fort Garden Advanced went to a signal school in Fort Garden, Georgia.
Okay.
And then
For those of us who don't speak military, what is signal school? What were you learning there?
Teletype communication, and I didn't know how I ended up. I was going to be in the infantry, but they moved me over because I typed a little bit, and so they moved me over in the signal school.
What's that like?
Oh, that was tremendous. We went up and we was going to climb. We had a little Jew boy from New York. He thought we didn't want to move up to the 5th. They had 10 stations. He said, we want to be, he liked to dictate a little bit, a little runt, but he convinced us we need to climb, start at the bottom. It took us a half a day just to get, where the mountains started climbing. We spent the night up, and about halfway up, you had a station we slept in a cave where, they spent the night and was going to try to get to finish, but I had to be back in camp, the next morning. And we went on up, and I hate to say it, but we only got to the 8th station. We were going to be AWOL if we didn't get back to camp, so we had to scoot down. I fussed at him all the way. The rest of the time we were together there in camp, for taking us on that extra walk at the bottom. But I wanted to honor standing on top of Fuji, but I got to fly over it a little and look at it from the air. So it wasn't nothing like the climbing that I wanted to carry some souvenir from the top. I had rolling lava coming down and got down pretty fast, but it's pretty hard to climb. We just had an archery club, and I was in we had competition with Japanese and different things. We got one of the things that's pretty interesting with the archery was my good friend is Will McPhail from Minnesota. But anyway, he and I went out and we was going to practice a little in a ring out there pretty close to camp, and we got our bows and stuff. We headed out there, and the Japanese they had a little training stuff, you know. We didn't know what, you know, it's just a field there where you go out and do a little extracurriculars. But the Japanese had a group there too, you know. They had their little army and stuff, you know, that they didn't try to combat or anything because they were the defeated. But anyway, they were all they were hiding out. They were in the bushes and stuff, being kind of secluding themselves. And we come out with our bows and started man, they started coming up everywhere. they let us know that those arrows wasn't no blank shots there. we found we knew where they was all located. They want us to know. So we changed our hunting from our practice field to another place. So they were satisfied if we take our bows and leave. Well, if you didn't have anything against them, and I was in the whole outfit, we had about over in our battalion, there was 2 of us out of over 700, and I was one of them, good conduct medal. So I was fortunate. I didn't get caught up drunk and drag in, didn't get to show up and didn't have to spend any brig time or whatever. So over there it was pretty easy. I mean, a lot of those young kids, they come by and they get carried away and get into another world, and whether it should have been. And that's unfortunate. They were immature, and I was 20-something. I was 22, I think, when it got me. I had some time, and
so, and that, you know, that's and to buy liquor. The people who are getting promoted were buying liquors for their superiors.
yeah, they wanted money, and I said, I'm not giving you a dime, because I'm not going to earn you to get me a promotion. I don't want a promotion for that, and they didn't like me, but they understood that I wasn't going to sponsor them, and I don't know how it worked out that the whole bunch I got the deal, and they got bad names.
Yeah, they told me that just a few years ago, they helped you reunite with one of your friends from the service.
Charlotte, give me a
Yes.
surprise. I thought, well, I'll never see him again, but
So
he's my archery one that we went out.
that was your archery buddy?
Yeah, he's a big old stout German, and he's pretty good with his bow, and we enjoyed, target. But
So what was his name?
Phil,
Kenneth Peel.
Huh?
Kenneth Peel.
Kenneth Phil, yeah. That's how good my memory is. I already forgotten. Good buddy right there.
So how did they set that up for you? What
No,
did they tell
they
you was
set
going
me up,
on?
but-
Yeah, what did they tell you was going on before you found out what they were really doing?
Well, I was down, they set me up down and sent me the oldest daughter, Melinda, and then Charlotte went up, you flew him down here, didn't
Yeah.
you? From Minnesota?
Yeah, from Iowa.
Iowa, yeah. And I never figured that there was, but they'd come out and their other daughter, Melinda's house, and he come up, and they knocked, and I didn't know what was going on. I saw him, then we had to hug and cry a little while, and then, that was, what a deal and everything.
And he called you Tex. He's the only one that
yeah.
ever called you Tex, but he came to the door and asked if Tex was there. And that got Dad's attention, and he went over there. I think he was very surprised.
I was surprised. I didn't figure to ever see him again. We had a lot of American soldiers, go there and they get to a native girl and get them pregnant, and they leave. I adopted one of the boys while I was there, to one of the half American, half Japanese. Kind of hid my boy. I paid, he would have him in the barracks and feed him because, nobody wanted Japanese anymore. Americans, because they're half breeds, and it's sad, really. But that's the things when you get into a country like that, you get unwanted prejudice, and you get kids from it, and they just hang out and they don't have anything. I supported if one come by and we'd bring it to barracks and bring some of me, and I had one that I took care of for the time, but I didn't have any relations with I didn't want to be guilty of what I saw. But the fruits from unwed mothers and orphan kids stayed there. But that's the only thing that I did. I adopt him temporarily and kind of eat with him and kind of done what I could do to encourage him, try to help him to get him an education. We had left kind of sponsored a little bit there, give him some boost.
About how old was this child?
Huh?
The one you sort of adopted, about how old was he?
About 4. Yes, early times. But there's, the veteran, they come home and boast about, stuff like that, and they don't think about what they could have leaving, not providing something to take care of possibilities that, could come from temporary enjoyment there. But anyway, that's unfortunate. But
Finally, our last interviewee is Johnny Wemkin, a first-class petty officer in the U.S. Navy from 1972 to 1982. As a U.S. Navy aviation ordnanceman, he specifically built bombs, armed rockets, and conducted maintenance on the guns aboard the USS Hancock, a World War II era aircraft carrier, and was at one point stationed off the coast of Vietnam. He also participated in Operation Frequent Wind, the final evacuation of American and Vietnamese civilians during the fall of Saigon in South Vietnam. Unfortunately, we lost our video feed for this interview, but that does not take away from the stories that Mr. Wemkin has to tell. So we hope you enjoy his interview.
I was an aviation ordnanceman, and that we built bombs, rockets, missiles, and took care of small arms and aircraft, machine guns. That's what my job was.
So your job
Gonna
was
be.
like maintenance and repair of those things?
It was maintenance and repair on the guns, but we built the bombs and armed the rockets and stuff that went on the aircraft. So that was
Oh, wow.
That was a chore.
Yeah.
I got to send some bombs to Hanoi.
Oh, wow. So yeah, I'm not too familiar with the types of bombs that were used. So like, what were the names of them? What were they?
Well, we had just general purpose bombs, rockeye, laser guided bombs, and we had various rockets, air to air, air to ground rockets that we messed with. I don't know how much of that I should talk about. I don't know what the classification of them are now.
So at the time, I'm guessing that at the time the technical parts of how they were made was classified then.
Yeah, a lot of them. The general purpose bombs, no, that probably wasn't classified, but the rockets and some of the laser guided stuff would have been classified.
What was the biggest bomb you ever worked on? The heavy, like poundage wise?
The biggest bomb I ever worked with poundage wise was 1,000-pound bomb. It was laser guided, so it was big.
Wow. And what was the time frame? What years were you doing this?
I was in the Navy from 1982 or 1972 to 1982. I worked on the USS Hancock, it's CV-19. It was the oldest aircraft carrier in the fleet at the time, from 1972 to 1976. And I was a ship's company ordnanceman. We were the ones that had bombs in our storage facilities, and we built them up and sent them up to the ordnanceman on the aircraft carrier flight deck to put on the airplanes. So my time on the aircraft carrier was spent playing with bombs and rockets.
Tell them about what the uniform was back then, the working uniform.
My work uniform was a light blue shirt, a dungaree shirt, and dungaree pants. They were blue jeans, basically. They were bell-bottomed, and then you had the Dixie cup for a hat. You know.
Tell them why they told you that they were bell-bottom, that they had to be bell-bottom jeans.
They had to be bell-bottomed because if you fell overboard, you would tie your pant legs at the very end into a knot, and then you'd flop them over and catch air in them, and that'd be your flotation device.
Water wings,
and
basically.
They were belled so that they'd catch more air.
And you'd be wearing your boots also, so
yeah.
The idea is that you take them off.
Yeah.
So not just a fashion statement for the time.
No, it wasn't just a fashion statement. There was a reason for everything. There was a reason for everything.
How'd they end up going overboard?
Got blown over by prop wash from a jet turning around, and that force of the jet exhaust blew them overboard.
Wow.
One of the guys that got blown overboard was not a flight deck crewman, and he shouldn't actually been up there during operations. So when you're assigned to the flight deck, you're taught how to avoid prop wash and, you know, getting blown overboard and things of that nature. You get blown down or something, but, you know, if you know what you're doing, you can. But if you don't know what you're doing, that exhaust can knock you for a loop. So that's the only two that I know of that we lost overboard. But we got one of them back, and the other one I don't know. We never found him. 1974, we were operating off the coast of Vietnam, and some guys were goofing around and come running out of the conning tower just as COD had started up. The COD was a airplane they used to fly mail and special supplies and things of that nature off of the ship and back on. Well, the COD always set right in front of the conning tower, and
What's the
guy-
conning tower?
pardon?
What's the conning tower, real quick?
That's just big structure where the captain's up at the top, and, you know, you got radar and all kinds of stuff down below it. And guy come running out of the conning tower door and ran right into the prop.
Oh no.
He wasn't where he's supposed to be, and he wasn't paying attention to what he's doing. And he paid the price.
Are you a shellback?
You know what?
Explain what that is.
flew over.
First tell us what is
a shellback is somebody that crosses the equator. And
before you're a shellback, what are you?
Before you're a shellback, you're a pollywog. And we were headed to Australia and got turned around 6 miles from the equator.
Oh.
They set this thing up. They have big they have big initiations, and they have all kinds of
junk WOG Day
that they do. I don't even want to talk about it. But just let it be known, you don't just get to go across the equator. When you go across the equator, there is an initiation. Shellbacks will initiate the polywogs. And a lot of the stuff they would do would not be okay in the world today.
That's right.
They would be in big trouble. So now, when I was in the anti-submarine patrol squadron, we flew across the equator, and I'm also a blue nose. We flew over the North Pole.
So a blue nose is someone who's gotten to fly over the North Pole?
Yeah.
Did they have an initiation for that?
No, they just said, note this time and date, because you are now a blue nose, and it would be put in your record. So they'd put it in the record that you flew over the North Pole. Saigon fell, they predicted Saigon was going to fall. So we turned around, went to Subic Bay, offloaded all of our fighter and attack squadrons their airplanes, people, and took on a squadron of Marine helicopters. And we went and did what they called Operation Frequent Wind, which was we pulled all the people, all Americans out of Saigon. We evacuated all of them. We sent the Marine helicopters in. They picked everybody up and brought them out. And when the Vietnamese military found out that we were out there, they started flying the Hueys that we'd supplied the Vietnamese, South Vietnamese. They started loading them with people, and they'd fly them out to our aircraft carrier. They'd land them, jump out, and just leave them. So we'd have to go and shove them off the side of the ship, which we shoved, I don't know, 10, 12 Hueys overboard, because the South Vietnamese military was just flying them out, and they wasn't going back. They were getting out of there.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
The global pandemic creating the conditions we are living in has certainly interrupted our lives. Our veterans and the active members of our armed forces have faced and continue to face interruptions for over 2 centuries, protecting our nation and sacrificing aspects of their lives we take for granted. From the forests and landscapes of Europe, the beaches of the Pacific, the jungles of Southeast Asia, and the harsh conditions of the Middle East, and everywhere in between, our armed forces have served, are serving, and will continue to serve
on behalf of everyone here at Western Texas College, we thank you for being part of our Veterans Day observance. Next time you see a veteran, say thank you.